Forum. I am the chair of the Civic Engagement Committee for the Albany NACP, and it is our pleasure to welcome you to tonight's forum. Before we get started, there's a couple of housekeeping rules we want to go over. Look for your nearest exit sign. There's one there, exit here, it's important. The bathrooms are through those double doors, and you go straight down and to your right, there's a bathrooms. There are two, and they're gender neutral. And we ask that you turn off your cell phones and put them on silence or the way it be. All right, so let's begin. We have planned an informative program to help the community as they make the decision as to who will be their next Albany District Attorney. We thank candidates for coming and agreeing to be a part of this forum. We most appreciate that. We also thank the Albany Housing Authority for making this venue available for us to host this forum. Our moderator for tonight's program is Mr. Corey James. He is a proud native of the Hudson Valley region who began his journey with Spectrum News 1 in Albany in July 2022, bringing a dynamic blend of talent and passion in his home state. With a commitment to making a meaningful impact, Mr. James is thrilled to collaborate with the exceptional team at Spectrum News 1. He is a distinguished alumnus of SUNY Cortland. Mr. James holds a bachelor's degree in communications and in Africana studies in 2013, laying the foundation for his remarkable career. Beyond his journalistic pursuits, Mr. James finds solace in the embrace of family, the exploration of literary treasures, and the culinary adventures that unfold in his kitchen. With an unwavering dedication to excellence and a zest for life, Corey James embodies the essence of a modern storyteller poised to captivate audiences with every broadcast with his endeavor. And so, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Mr. James as our moderator for tonight's program. Welcome, Mr. James.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It's great to see you all. We're here for a very important conversation that needs to be had, correct? My name is Corey James. As you heard, I'm a multimedia journalist and reporter with Spectrum News, and I am serving as the moderator for tonight's event. It is my pleasure to welcome the panelists and introduce them to you. We have Mr. Lee Kinlan, Mr. Ralph Ambrosio, and the Honorable David Soros. We will hear from each of them in just a moment, but I would like to take a few moments to review tonight's program and offer some ground rules. Each panelist will have the opportunity to give a 2-minute introduction. After the introductions, panelists will respond to questions sent to us in advance. All panelists' answers will be limited to 2 minutes to answer each question. Our timekeeper from the League of Women Voters of Albany County, sitting right here, this is Mr. Tom. If you notice there's any, he has placards. Those placards will have a 1-minute cue, 30-second cue, as well as then time, which indicates time to stop. We have allotted 25 minutes for our panelists to answer the questions that were sent in advance. Then from about 6:45 to 7:25, 30 minutes, we will transition to our question and answer segment. We will take questions from you all, as in the audience. If anyone has a question for our panelists, you will raise your hand, and one of the sponsors will give you an index card and a pen to write your question. In the interest of time, if there are multiple questions asked about the same topic, we will then read one of those questions and allow the candidates to respond. So even if you do not hear your exact question submitted in advance during the forum, the candidates will be addressing as many topics as we can in our allotted time frame. Our program will end at 7:50 p.m., and as we must be out of this building at 8 o'clock. So if you know the saying, you don't gotta go home, but you gotta get out of here, right? The candidates and I met earlier this afternoon to decide the order for the candidates to present their opening statement and answer questions, to which they all are in agreement with. Now, we are ready to begin. I will call on the candidates. Mr. Lee Kinlan will begin as he introduces himself.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Lee Kinlan. My name is Lee Kinlan. I was born and raised in Albany. And after college and law school, I joined the Marine Corps. I became a Army prosecutor down in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. In 2005, I deployed to Fallujah. I came back to Albany with my wife and son in 2006 to raise my family. I now live in the town of New Scotland with my wife and my 3 teenage boys and our 2 dogs. When I came back to Albany, I first started working for the Public Defender's Office right down the street in Albany City Court. In 2014, that is about 10 years ago, I opened up my own firm. And I know what it's like to run a small business in this county. Paying bills, keeping employees, being accountable to those clients who come in my front door and ask for help. I've been involved in the criminal justice system my entire career. In fact, I've been around the criminal justice system my entire life. It's something I've dedicated my life to. Nights, weekends, blood, sweat, and tears. I've been in small courts where during the day it's the Department of Public Works garage and at night it's a town court. I've been in county courts from St. Lawrence to Clinton to Dutchess to Hamilton, Herkimer, Rensselaer, and Albany. I've been in appellate courts. I've been in the Court of Appeals. I know what it's like to have my sleeves rolled up, working with prosecutors and judges and victims and defendants to find justice in every case. I'm running for Albany County District Attorney because it's time to restore accountability, integrity, and leadership to a district attorney's office that is in desperate need of all 3. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a crime problem here in Albany. And it's that crime problem that is a legacy of 20 years of inaction of David Soares. Now, the problems are many, but the solutions I have, and I will implement them as soon as I become Albany County District Attorney. Thank you very much.
Next up, Mr. Ralph Ambrosio.
Good evening. I'm Ralph Ambrosio. I'm running for District Attorney, of course, in Albany County. The District Attorney's Office has been challenged recently. The criminal justice system in New York State has always been challenging, but now since we've had these recent reviews and the legislature putting their foot in our system, the system has almost become intolerable. It's almost impossible. Now, I've been in the criminal justice system as a professional for 47 years. I became first a New York State trooper. I became a lawyer while I was with the state police. I left the state police, I prosecuted. I was an assistant district attorney in Greene and Chatham, or Columbia County, where I'm from. And I've learned a fair amount about our system. I know that with the present challenges, we have to reorganize the district attorney's office. The district attorney's office needs to go to a central case evaluation from the central booking. It has to happen now. We have to talk to the officers, the arresting officers in real time. And we have the technology to do that now. The early case evaluation has been used in this state for decades. It's time to bring it to Albany. It's time to get our discovery together very early on. Post-arrest, but pre-arraignment. We can't work with deadlines after the arraignment occurs. We may lose a case here and there. And that case here and there has victims. We have to make sure that the victims are secure and safe. We have to make Albany a safe and reasonable place to live. And the criminal justice system is an integral part of that. I'm going to be your DA, and I'm going to bring justice to Albany County. Thank you very much.
All right, and the Honorable David Soares.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you again this evening. Look, I've had the pleasure and the privilege of being your district attorney for the last 20 years. The thing that I'm so proud of is the fact that I have seen this community rise. I have seen the absolute best of times. And I do believe that at this moment we are experiencing the absolute worst of times. When you see 9 people who are visiting a trauma center, 3 of them visiting a funeral parlor, that says all that you need to know. And that's just the first 2 weeks of the summer, with, I can assure you, plenty more to go. I have the honor and privilege of working with every member of law enforcement in the Albany County community and even beyond. All of those individuals, by the way, and departments that have endorsed my candidacy because they've experienced 20 years of working hand in hand with our office to make this a safer community. I'm looking forward to discussions tonight because the questions really that I'm interested in answering are your questions. I actually appreciate the two gentlemen who are sitting to my right who both want to be public servants at a time when it's the least convenient to be public servants. But I will tell you this, there's no one at this table more qualified than me to continue leading this cause, and there's been no one who has been more vocal than me in the entire state of New York about these laws. The police and I have been successful in reducing crime on 1st Street, on 2nd Street, but we lost the tools necessary on State Street. And this is so much more than a campaign about candidates. This is about the future of New York State and the future of Albany County. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll begin with questions. The first question will be posed to Mr. Lee Henlon, then we'll follow suit with Mr. Ralph Ambrosio, and then the Honorable David Soares.
Sorry.
It's okay.
What would your priorities be as district attorney, and what would change in the incumbent's approach to fulfilling the responsibilities of the district attorney?
So, and first I should have said this when we began, I want to thank the NWCB and the League of Women Voters in the Albany County for allowing us to have this forum here tonight. Anyway, so look, let's talk about the meeting we're going to have with all hands on January 2nd, 2025, in which I gather everybody, the secretarial staff, the investigators, the assistant district attorneys, everybody in the district attorney's office in a room in the courthouse. And I lay out my priorities for the first 30 days. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to revamp and reorganize major crimes, special victims. Dedicate as much personnel, manpower, thought power, money, investigators as is needed to make sure that we start to take a crack at violent crime. Okay? We got to protect the victims of sexual assaults. We got to let them know that we're finally on their side. Now, I'm going to show up to the office every day. For those of you who know me, you know I'm typically the first one there and the last one to leave. So there's part of the leadership thing here that needs to be instituted, and that is you set out your intent early in terms of what we're going to do, and then you start to follow through with doing it yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been in courtrooms. I was in court today. I've been in courtrooms almost every day of my life, and that's part of it, right? Like, lead from the front. You want to put bad guys away? Well, you got to be there with your assistant district attorneys. You got to be there with your cops in court and saying, this is how we're going to do it. So those are the things we're going to do right away. Now, more long-term, how we fight the gun and violence problem in this town, well, we have to start using intelligence better from the Crime Analysis Center. We have to start going out there and putting together larger conspiracy cases, because the gun pipeline, these men bringing in guns from out of state, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 at a time, start using conspiracy laws to actually put teeth and put these guys away for longer periods of time. Actually send the message, personally, professionally, that these are the things we're going to start to do. It's not just going to be this reactive prosecution that we have now.
Mr. Ralph Ambrosio.
If I understand the question correctly, it was what I would do differently or to employ something different into our system. I think that upstate prosecutors have for decades tried to use central booking, an early case evaluation. For years we couldn't do it. Now the technology is there, the resources are there. I'm going to institute on January 2nd at 4 o'clock in the morning a brand new system. I'm going to be in contact with the arresting officers on every misdemeanor and felony arrest in Albany County. I'm going to reorganize the office so that my staff will be heavily involved in that. I believe if we get control of our streets on the smaller crimes, the bigger crimes will take care of themselves. I do not believe in siloing in the office. I don't think that the district attorney's office is large enough to be compartmentalized. I would like to share the information and the expertise of all of the lawyers across the board. The early case evaluation is key. You get to meet the arresting officers, they get to know you, they get to know what you're looking for, you get to teach them as to what you're looking for. This monster of discovery will be handled at the earliest possible moment, so it won't trip us up later. We're losing cases. 87% of the cases that are brought in criminal courts in upstate New York, only 13 to 15% of those cases make it through. And that's a tragedy. I'm going to address that, we're going to handle it, and we're going to deal with it. And you're going to get security. That's my pitch. That's what we're going to do. Thank you.
The only person at this table that has any understanding about what's happening right now in the Capital District is the person holding this microphone and talking to you right now. I will tell you that in 2004, 2005, when I began my career as the district attorney in Albany County, the largest department that we had prosecuting cases happened to be street crimes. And it was corner rips that we were doing every day. We were literally believing that we could prosecute drug sales one case at a time. That was the largest unit. The largest unit now in my office is our violent crime unit. The unit that deals with people who are shooting at one another. The unit that deals with 16 and 17-year-olds that are shooting at one another who go to family court for juice and crackers. The problem that we have are not the men and women who are wearing uniforms, nor the men and women in suits at the Albany County District Attorney's Office prosecuting cases. The problems that we have is this disastrous series of reforms that when we experience the confluence of them, we feel them. The biggest experiment pool right now with all of these reforms happen to be Black and brown communities. And let me tell every person sitting in this office, sitting in this room today, do not be fooled by the talking points that we're seeing right now, because what we have are a bunch of truthers who are denying the experience, the lived experience of people of color in this community, and the volume of violence that has quadrupled, but only quadrupled in very specific zip codes. So when we're talking today, let's not talk about the fantasy of central booking. I don't understand what that is. Let's not talk about the little townhouses and courts that exist in our smaller communities. Let's talk about where 70% of all violent crime is taking place, which is right here, in that direction, in that direction, and in that direction. And then let's talk about the unindicted co-conspirators, which happen to be the legislators who have performed legislative malpractice by giving us this gift.
All right, thank you for that. Now on to question number 2. You mentioned a little bit this in your introduction. How does your background and approach to the position differentiate you from others running for district attorney? We'll start with Mr. Kinlan again.
I started off first as a prosecutor in the Marine Corps, which is a really unique experience. Deadlines and a lot of competing interests. But let me tell you what had the biggest impact on me. It was being an assistant public defender down the street for about a year, and then an assistant conflict defender for about 5 years after that. I know that there have been some attempts to criticize me about my role in the criminal justice system up until now. Let me tell you what being a defense attorney has done. It's taught me empathy and compassion. It's taught me how the criminal justice system can affect lives. It's taught me how to relate to people who, truth be told, I don't know if anybody noticed, but like I grew up on Lenox Avenue in Albany, and I now live in the town of Wisconsin. I think everybody understands that I probably don't have the same shared experience as a lot of the people I represent. But I've done everything in my power because it's my job, it's my ethical responsibility to get to know everybody, every family I've ever had to help. And that, more than anything else, gives me an education in terms of what's needed in this town. So, look, I know I might not be some fire-breathing, pretend tough guy, but I know what it's like to be in a courtroom and to see the competing interests going back and forth. After 20 years of being in this town, I've lost friends and clients and people I've known to gun violence, and that hurts me personally. So don't try and imply somehow that I don't understand what's going on. I understand what's going on because I'm there, living it every day of my career. career. And yeah, in little courts and in big courts, and not just in Albany County. I see this violence everywhere, and it affects everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, public safety is my priority. Being a steward of the criminal justice system is not just about tough talk, it's about actually doing the work. And that's what I learned up until now. That's the education I've had, and that's what I'll bring to bear.
As far as I can tell, I'm the only person on this panel who has ever prosecuted a felony case in a state court in New York State. I was a prosecutor. I put people in prison. I held people accountable. I, as a New York State trooper, have arrested people and put handcuffs on them. I've also helped people, and I know the difference. And this isn't about braggadocio. This is about knowing what the job is. I have never lost a criminal case in New York State. That's as a prosecutor and also as a defense counsel. I've represented minorities. I represented a 21-year-old Marine who was accused of rape, of raping a 14-year-old girl. I proved that he was innocent. I had a To Kill the Mockingbird moment. I was Atticus Finch. The situation was, Atticus Finch, however, didn't have DNA. I did. Now, I know what the court system is. Mr. Soros here likes to say that he knows what he's doing. As far as I know, he has never prosecuted a felony case in Albany. Neither has Mr. Kimball. As far as I know, I may be wrong, but he has never prosecuted in a state court. I have. I've also defended. And now I've come back to the prosecution. I have 47 years of experience. I've never had so much as a personnel complaint. I understand what's going on here too. And I'm telling you that if you gain control of the smaller crimes, you can control the violent crimes. New York City went through this in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And it wasn't until they had that broken window policy where they paid attention to the little things that New York City turned around. It turned around under Giuliani, but it was mastered under Bloomberg. And Bloomberg was a centrist. I followed him all my life, and he had it right. And maybe Mr. Soros doesn't know what early case evaluation and central booking is, because he's never done it.
Well, I think between the rocket docket and central booking, Albany County has so much to look forward to. But that's not what makes me qualified and what makes me, what I think is the most important trait to doing my job. There is a difference, ladies and gentlemen, between being dumb and being dangerous. I myself, I grew up in a neighborhood in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, Lorraine Street. And if you went there and polled any of the ladies and the gentlemen who lived on Lorraine Street, they will tell you exactly how dumb I used to be as a kid. Just running around and with all my 30 other friends who we just did those things. They do the same thing here in this community as well. Young kids who are involved in really dumb things. You've got to be able to see through it. And with those cases, you bring those cases to the Community Accountability Board. You apply restorative justice practices to those cases. And it's not just kids, it's adults too. There's a way for you to divert those cases so that you can focus on the most dangerous of offenders. By the way, we live in a state that now does not permit our judges to consider dangerousness. I want you to think about that for a second. I mentioned to you in the last 2 weeks, we have had 9 bodies visit our trauma center, 3 of which are going to be going to funeral parlors, one of which is a dear young man who was part of one of my diversion programs who will be buried on Thursday. We have parents in this community that are running up to Albany Med to gather their children at a time when we are experiencing the most dangerous and violent wave, but judges cannot consider dangerousness. And kids that are out there with loaded firearms get to go to family court, and they're released back to mom and dad right after the proceedings. And we wonder what's happening. It's not a police issue, it's not a prosecutor's issue, it is a state legislature issue, and I'm the only one talking about that.
All right, we'll go on to question number 3. This one is under the category of drug laws. Studies show racial disparities in drug law enforcement even though white people and people of color use and sell drugs at the same rate. What would you do to minimize these disparities? Starting with Mr. Kidman.
That is a tough question. And the statistics you cited are exactly correct. There has been a de-emphasis on drug prosecutions in Albany County. That's true. And there has been an attempt, at least, to come up with some sort of alternative treatments to diversion, which is great. You know, there are now in Albany, because of the Albany Police Department, pre-arrest diversion practices where we can get people of all color to diversionary courts to treatment plans, which I think is great, right? To be honest. We find now that most drug use is an addiction issue, and I think everybody in this room has been touched one way or another by addiction issues, right? So if we can figure out ways to keep those alternative treatment courts going, to provide them greater resources, to plus up what we're able to do, not just through intervening when we find somebody with drugs. And look, I know this is supposed to be a debate or a candidate forum, but I will give some credit to David, because back in the day, we did come up with Rockefeller reforms that were started in Albany County. It's true. Like, look, I remember being in Albany City Court and doing all those defenses on all those drug rips and thinking, what are we doing with all this, right? And so how we've handled drug arrests in Albany County has progressed a lot over the years, which is why I'm so confused now when it comes to these discussions about how the current administration wants to somehow work backwards. Like, look, reform is a good thing. If we can move towards a position where the criminal justice system is not just rounding up people and throwing them in jail, regardless of their color, I think that's a good thing. But we have to look forward and be prospective about these things and understand that the criminal justice system needs to become more equitable and fair.
The question asked is being asked to a group of prosecutors. Now, we're all feeling human beings, and we worry about the people. We love the people of Albany County, and we want the best for them. But as a prosecutor, I know a few things about the criminal procedure law. And the criminal procedure law has something called 16058. Now, it's not something that we do in prosecution, but if a person is convicted of a felony, a nonviolent drug felony, when they complete their sentence, they can come back to the district attorney's office when I'm there, and I will offer them a 16058 conditional sealing order. That is, it allows the person to seal their conviction, even a felony plus 3 misdemeanors. That's going to help that person not to reoffend. That's going to help that person to get a good job, so they don't have to take that job application and check that horrible box that says, yeah, I'm a felon, and I was convicted of a felony drug crime. I actually did this in 2017. I had one of my friends come to me, his daughter had an early conviction back in 2005. It's retroactive. How many people do you know that are suffering with having a criminal history related to drug convictions? I can take that off their system. I can do a conditional sealing order under 16050. That's my offer to you. And we can make sure that once they get through with their sentence, once they pay their debt back to society, whatever they do, anger management, drug rehabilitation, you come to me as the district attorney, and I will apply for court for 16058. Thank you.
Our system, the criminal justice system, is the only system where there are such generalizations that pass off as fact. For example, you can have a police officer who commits a crime across the country, but you will experience the reverberations right here in our own community. Actually, this very community experienced that with the death of George Floyd, where we saw trucks being burned right here in the front of the building. Criminal justice system, someone who is incarcerated in Rikers Island and spends more time than is lawfully able to do, has the reverberations of having policies change for our local corrections facility, which does not embody any of those qualities that Rikers has. But here's what happens, ladies and gentlemen. We talk about the fact that there's disproportionate arrests of people of color versus people who are not people of color for drugs, right? We have these conversations. It never changes. There are no nuances to these conversations. It's just put out there like some fact, it's dropped, and then we just say, oh, we really don't know how to handle the rest of this conversation. Let me tell you about Black and brown communities. I happen to come from one. I happen to do most of my work in one. And it's the conditions that are in those communities that draw young people of color to the corners. The corners are always higher. The reality is we need to change the conditions in our communities where our young kids can actually feel like they have hope, like they can walk into a job at a Stewart's or somewhere else. But if you look at the number of bodegas and the number of bodegas that are hiring our kids, you're not going to find them. And so what do they resort to? They resort to taking up space that was occupied by a person that I prosecuted last week. So the conversation that we need to have here are nuanced. It's about changing the conditions in Black and brown communities instead of talking about all of the outcomes that we never seem to have numbers for.
Move on to the next category, juvenile justice. What would you do to reduce the number of juveniles, particularly Latino and African American youth, who are brought into the criminal justice system? What policies would you put in place to ensure fair and unbiased use of prosecutorial discretion in juvenile court? We'll start with Mr. Ambrosio.
Juvenile justice is in such flux. We have raised the age. And I'd just like to say that when I was a trooper, the most vicious assault that I ever saw was between two 17-year-old boys who were fighting over a girl. Now, there's no sense to it. Young men that are in our communities, their bodies grow much faster than their maturity. And we have to take care and provide. I agree with David. This is not so much a criminal justice system. By the time they come to us, we've sort of lost them almost. And we have to figure out ways to rejuvenate them after they've been arrested. Now, to raise the age, 16, 17, 18, I don't know what's going on with it. They should return to what it was, where you're 16, you're considered a juvenile delinquent again, and you can be dealt with as an adult. I don't know where this goes. The Manhattan Institute set up their research, and as of 2022, which was about a year after the Raise the Age occurred, there were 25 more deaths of 16, 17, 18-year-old children than there were the year before. The problem is not the juvenile justice system, let me tell you. And there's very little. As a prosecutor, there's truth, and truth. First, you find out if a crime has been committed, you document that crime, and you bring that to a justice, a judicial official, an adult who can sit and try to figure out how to solve the problem. By the way, the problem can't be solved in Albany. It can't be done remotely. It's got to be done in our communities. It's got to be done in front of our elected judges. You've got to give judges more discretion. So I guess the answer is, I would advocate more discretion, more allowance on the part of our judicial officers in our communities. Thank you.
The juvenile justice system is broken beyond repair. And the promise of Raise the Age was built on 3 elements. What they said was, hey, we don't think that young kids should be in prison with grown adults. And how many prosecutors in New York State agreed with that sentiment? I raised my hand. All of us raised our hands. They also said, a child who commits one crime or has a bad day should not be judged for the rest of his or her life based upon that one day. How many people in this room agreed? Prosecutors all across the state agreed. And then they said they should be in a setting where they're going to get necessary counsel and treatment and access to services that they require. And how many of you prosecutors agree? Again, one out of 62 that raised his hand in agreement. Do you know what we got? What we got was a law that says if a kid, 16, 17-year-old, has a loaded firearm and is about to go commit a drive-by, if that individual is stopped by the Albany County Sheriff and does not get the chance to commit that drive-by, but did not display the gun, that individual gets to go to family court to be released and get milk and crackers and then be right back out on the street. In Albany County, it's 530 cases. Half of the cases in Albany County are violent crimes. Half of the violent crimes involve the carrying of a loaded firearm, and 1/3 of all violent crimes with firearms involve the discharge of that firearm. How many people in this room right now think that raise the age is working? Please raise your hand.
The next question will be under the use of force.
Oh, I didn't think so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What about orders?
Yeah, you skipped it.
That's my fault, yeah. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Look, I agree. I agree with David. I was in family court last week on a raise the age case. I'm in court with these kinds of cases a lot, and I can tell you the frustration of us practitioners dealing with raise the age here in Albany County. Because what happens is some ADA who's overworked and overburdened with other cases wanders down to Albany Family Court, doesn't really know what he or she is supposed to do, doesn't really have direction from up on high, doesn't really know what their litigation plan is for a case like this, and just kind of throws his or her arms in the air and says, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I didn't hear anything from up high, so let's just go in. See, this is the problem when you don't have a litigator in charge of your office, when your administrator barely shows up to work. There is no rhyme, reason, or direction in terms of how the Albany County District Attorney's Office handles raise the age cases. And I think we can also all agree that raise the age has probably saved a bunch of lives. It's probably saved a bunch of kids. But these outlying, you want to talk about talking points, these outlying cases that, yeah, are a giant problem. There's no plan inside of a courtroom to actually try and fix these things. There's no litigation plan to actually give a judge cover when a judge wants to keep a case and not send it down to family court. There's no opportunity for a judge to say, you know what, people, I agree with your argument. Let's not send it to family court. Like, that's what we lawyers do, is you go to court and you argue a position, you try and fight for your side. You don't say, oh, please, legislature, at some point in the future, will you change these things? Now, the cynical view is that he just can't do his job, and he's blaming Raise the Age for all of his failures. So what I would do is I'd get in there myself. I'd dedicate men and women to actually working with the youth part of the family court and to save more lives instead of complaining about what could be and what should be done.
The next topic will be under use of force, and we'll start with Mr. Soares. The question is, as district attorney, how would you handle a fatal use of force incident involving local police?
Well, that question is an interesting question, seeing as how Executive Order 147 several years ago took that specific task away from all local prosecutors. And what we are now required to do is we are involved initially when law enforcement reaches out to us and shares with us what has transpired. It is then the obligation of law enforcement to contact the Attorney General's office, which we also then contact, in order to give them the up-to-the-minute information that we as local prosecutors have on those cases, and then those cases are then addressed by the Attorney General's offices. So that's the law. So the question about what a local prosecutor would do at this point does not have any bearing on district attorneys. But I do want to talk about that specific law. We talked about Executive Order 147 doing that, but let's also talk about the law involving raise the age. The law involving raise the age is the law. It is not someone who believes that they have a great looking suit on, going into court and making the most amazing argument that is going to really impress the judge. The definition of display, according to the law, is taking a gun out and pointing it at you. Lifting a shirt where the gun is not pointed at you, having the gun in a car is not displayed, and the problem is so many kids who are involved in this life continue to go home and have milk and cookies, as opposed to be placed somewhere where they can do no harm. 56% of the raised the age kids that go on to become like 18 and 19, 56% go on to commit greater crimes. 36%, while still in raise the age territory, 36% continue to commit crimes. These aren't numbers that I'm tossing out there for the world. These are facts, so let's have some facts.
Mr. Hinman?
And again, I agree. The executive order basically takes it out of the hands of the local prosecutor and gives it to the Attorney General's office now to investigate these things, and in serious cases, it can go to the Department of Justice. I mean, obviously, we understand that a few years ago, there was a case, an Albany cop was accused of shooting a young man, and Mr. Sor's office, I think it can politely be said, maybe mishandled that case by trying to investigate it in his own grand jury. So removing these cases and taking them away from the district attorney's office is probably the right move, because you need that removal and you need the greater resources of the Attorney General's office to prosecute or to at least investigate these cases. So again, it's a good question, but I think it's the issue's been superseded by executive order at this point.
I agree, there's no question about it. You had some difficulties over in Rensselaer County. I think the district attorney's name was Abelard, wasn't it? And he tried his best to send usually what happens under Article 35, when you have excessive force, or you have deadly physical force under the penal law, you place it before a grand jury, used to be placed before a grand jury by the district attorney. And the grand jury is the investigative arm of the county court. That has been superseded. There is really no question here. I agree with both of my opponents here. There is nothing that a district attorney in Albany County can do if there's a deadly physical force issue used, or deadly physical force used in Albany County. Thank you.
Next question comes in the category of immigrant rights. As DA, what would you do to develop a trusting relationship with the immigrant community in Albany? The order will go, Mr. Ambrosio, Honorable Soares, Mr. Hinman.
As the district attorney of Albany County, I can't tell you the outcome of the cases I bring, but I can promise you this. I will prosecute people for what they have done, not who they are. And that's broader than just immigration. I'm talking about racism, I'm talking about anti-Semitism, I'm talking about any of the hidden agendas that occur in the hearts of complaining witnesses, police officers, my staff, and anyone else involved in the criminal justice system. Only what they have done, not who they are. Now, I will meet with any group, anytime, gay, straight, Jew, Catholic, Italian, naturally, and the Nevada, I can't help it. I'll meet with anybody. I'll reach out to every single group. Anybody, I'll have an open door policy. But I have to tell you, the only thing I can tell you for absolutely sure is that I will prosecute people only for what they have done, not for who they are. Ever. Thank you.
Andy. The question again, please.
The question is, as DA, what would you do to develop a trusting relationship with the immigrant community in Albany?
Very, very important question, given how incredibly diverse Albany has become in the last 20 years. And the beauty of our community is through its diversity. I've handled a number of cases over the years involving immigration. Here are the things that we won't do, because I can go on and on about the things that we have done. Here's the one thing that we won't do. We will not allow an individual who comes forward to report a crime, a person who may have their status in question, we would not allow for any government entity to come into our jurisdiction to punish an individual for coming forward with their victimization. We also have an incredible crime advocate unit in the office that has a lot of understanding of how the immigration process works, and we work directly with representatives from immigration in order to make sure that we're able to get visas for people who we want to extend their stay for purposes of being available as witnesses in our trials. And then we write to said agency what the person has done, and we hope that that works for them. But we have, over the years, a number of people who have been human trafficked that were not citizens, who were afraid to come forward, but once they were apprehended here in Albany, our response was entirely different. And your job is to meet people when they're experiencing the very worst things in their lives, and to provide the most reasonable and sympathetic journey.
Mr. Kendall.
Thank you. So I see this as kind of an answer with two parts, because obviously we need to worry about the victims caught up in these things. So with the overriding theory that my number one concern is public safety, the people of Albany County, those people lucky enough to be in Albany County, we have to take public safety into account. So obviously offering a safe haven for those victims of crimes who feel comfortable enough to come forward, to know that they have an ally in Lee Kinlan as the district attorney's office, and the men and women who I would work with. You gotta let them know that, hey, look, we don't care about your status, we care about your status, you're a crime victim and we're gonna help you, right? So you have to worry about that. But there's another part to this equation that's far more difficult, and I want to address that. These people who have been accused of crimes, eventually get convicted of crimes, we can all agree that our immigration system is broken in a lot of different ways. But of course we have to think, look, certain crimes of moral turpitude, as we lawyers say, most felony convictions can lead to negative immigration consequences, whether you're here legally or not. So if, this is a big if, obviously taking into account public safety, if someone's caught up in the criminal justice system accused of a crime, and it might affect their immigration status, it might affect how their family is able to support itself. I mean, obviously we understand now criminal convictions and all the secondary and tertiary impacts of being convicted of a crime. If there's a way we can figure out how to lessen the impact on that individual's family, obviously at the back end with actually one of Ralph's ideas is, hey, look, you can come back, you can have your conviction withdrawn, and there are certain ways we can figure out your sentence. But we want to make sure that to the best of our ability, we keep families together, again, with that overriding concern of public safety. So immigration is, we could be here for the entire night talking about the immigration problem, so I'll put the mic down.
All right, the next question is under the category, please. What do you think is and is not working about bail reform? What would you do to change it? What has the impact been? We'll start with Mr. Kinlan.
Let's talk about the old way first. The old way, all you can do, misdemeanors, felonies, anything. You go to court, you might have cash bail set, you might get remanded, and then that's it, okay? The new way passed a couple of years ago, in an omnibus bill with not a lot of thought or detail built in, they suddenly got rid of cash bail for a lot of things. We've been backtracking. So bail reform as it stands now, which still needs to be fixed, I support 100% the locking up, the detention of, the tracking of people accused of violent felonies, people involved in violent crimes like domestic violence, people accused of sexual violence. If the best way to keep our community safe is to set bail, is to set release under supervision, is for electronic monitoring on them, is to send them, is to mandate them for treatment, I'm in full support of it, okay? What we have now is most misdemeanors, like except for obviously domestic violence, most misdemeanors, there's just no cash bail required. Okay? Now, is bail reform perfect? Absolutely not. I think we all agree with that. I think we've all seen problems and mistakes. But the thing that I would do as the DA is, to every limit of the law that's allowable, I would find a way to keep the public the most safe that I possibly could. And I understand that my opponent's goons have put up every false message they can about exactly what I believe about bail reform. But I need everybody in this room and everybody paying attention online to understand that public safety is my number one priority, and that will be my priority as district attorney.
Bail reform. The no cash bail has turned our courts into fast food drive-thrus. I was prosecuting about a year and a half ago, and you simply can't get defendants to come into court to seek justice. Bail reform has been a complete and utter failure. Having said that, it's the law, and I've got to follow it, because when I take my oath, I'm going to follow the laws. What I will do when I go to arraignment, when my people go to, my professional staff goes to arraignment, I will ask the court to join with me in warning the defendant that if they don't show up for court as they're required, either for pretrial, trial, or post-trial sentencing, we can proceed without them. That warning is called a Parker warning. And the Parker warning was always done as an emergency. I only used it maybe 3 or 4 times in 40 years as a lawyer. It's an emergency provision. Well, we're in an emergency right now. We've got to get people into court to administer justice. Now, that Parker warning, once we warn the defendant that he's got to show up and we're going to go without him, we're going to try him in absentia, or her in absentia, the judge is going to say it, I'm going to say it, and his defense counsel is going to say it. His defense counsel will be committing malpractice if he didn't pull that defendant aside and say, did you hear what you just got? That's called a Parker warning, you better show up. Because the next time you see this judge, if you don't show up, you may have to bring your toothbrush. It's very simple. People versus Parker, 1982 has been around forever. I'm shocked that it hasn't been used. I've used it, and it's not been used. When you put the person who's responsible for making the decision, the defendant, and the same person has the consequences of not showing up, be the same person, you start to get really good decisions. And defendants are going to come to court again. Thank you.
Bail reform and the variety of different reforms that have been passed along the same line, whether it's the HALT Act, whether it's discovery, less is more, have been utter failures. Bail reform specifically has been a failure on 2 levels. Here are the 2 levels that they've been failures at. A, it changes the nature of the simple task of arresting someone. Also, for certain crimes, the vast majority of misdemeanors, nonviolent crimes, people are just released. So let me give you an example. And I hope to do this quickly, and I apologize for speaking so fast. Right over here on this street, there's a place called the City Mission. Most of the people that are coming out of corrections go to the City Mission. You have individuals that come by to the City Mission, find a few people hanging out, and they say, hey, you guys want to make like $50 today? Sure. Jump in the car. So you have 6 people jumping in the car. They go over to Cross Gates Mall, and they just run into Macy's, and they grab everything they can, and they bring it out. You go to a Colony Center, where every day around 3 o'clock, it's gladiator school, because people are running in, seeking the most expensive items, mostly polo and other high-end products, and they get out. Those individuals who, if they happen to be arrested, are brought to the station, they're given an appearance ticket, or as we call them, the disappearance ticket. We give them the appearance ticket and we say, hey, you gotta come back in 2 weeks. 2 weeks goes by, they don't come back. But a judge can't issue a warrant then. Judge has to give them another 2 weeks. And then they issue a warrant on the fourth week. But guess what? Those individuals aren't apprehended as soon as the police walk out the door, so it might take an average of 6 weeks. What we've done is we've taken all of the risks away from stealing, which is why we have stores closing, which is why we have chains that are removing Rite Aids, This is a problem, and the people who are advocates for this, they're not living in the real world. They are daydream believers.
All right. The next question, the categories of rehabilitation and prevention. What are your positions related to prosecuting vulnerable populations, people with disabilities, mental illnesses, and how would you support rehabilitation for the population? We'll start with Mr. Ambrosio, and go to Mr. Soares, Mr. Kendall.
The entire criminal justice system is based upon free will. A person who does not have free will by mental incapacity cannot be charged with a crime. Or if they are charged with a crime, you can make whatever allowances you can to determine whether or not they have the capacity to be charged. I broke in Dover Plains, New York. Anybody know where Dover Plains is? Are you familiar with Wasatch State Hospital and Harlem Valley State Hospital? Harlem Valley State Hospital, thank you, was an adult home for mentally ill people, and Wasatch was the same. It was an outstanding facility, and people were kept clean and healthy, and they were treated with respect. And somewhere along in the late 70s, we decided that that was warehousing and that was bad. Well, maybe it was bad, and maybe there were problems, but with new technology, with systems we can put on the person, we can detect abuse. I think we have to spend a lot more money, a lot more resources with people who are disabled, mentally challenged. They don't deserve the criminal justice system because they don't have the intent. Thank you.
Mr. Soares.
The gentleman to my right is absolutely correct. We have a system in Albany County where we have wonderful, wonderful people who work in the Department of Health, Department of Mental Health, and a variety of other specialists that are sitting at the same tables as both defense attorneys and prosecutors who are working to identify those conditions. They have examinations routinely so that we can take individuals who have no ability to form the intent. We don't process them through the criminal justice system. But there are other ideas, ladies and gentlemen, and this is what I'd like to invite other agencies within county government, within state government to consider for a moment. Okay, law enforcement, we are summoned to a place. There has to be some event that we are summoned to. I can show you crime mapping in Albany County dating back the last 20 years. And you want to know something? What you're going to see are the same dots in the same neighborhoods, right? Now, we use those dots to indicate a shooting, a stabbing, a violent crime, a 911 call for health. We use those dots for our purposes, but there are secondary purposes as well. Why can't the Department of Health, Department of Mental Health, the state departments use those same materials that we use from a crime analysis center and treat them as trauma spaces, okay? We know them as places where people are being harmed, but in some of those harming, we know that there's mental health issues in. So why don't we have other governmental entities that are responsible for providing these services, deploy these services in a very unique way, using the same materials that we use from the Crime Analysis Center to do preventative work? Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What are your positions related to prosecuting vulnerable populations, people with developmental disabilities, mental illness, and how would you support rehabilitation for the population?
Sure, and I apologize for having to repeat the conversation because I feel as if the last two answers got us pretty far afield. We're always asking for help from somebody else, and I feel like the question has to do with what would the district attorney's office do. You know, look, alternative treatment courts have been a wonderful success when they're funded, when they're manned, when they're paid attention to, because the reality is today these individuals get caught up in the criminal justice system. Veterans, a place near and dear to my heart is veterans deal with mental health issues, with addiction mental health issues are rampant through the criminal justice system. Addiction problems are everywhere. And we don't have dedicated tracks or prosecutors or training to help deal with these things. They're kind of handled on a one-off basis, and it depends on the judge you get, the DA you get. Look, what we need to do is found and fund a restorative justice bureau, right? Where we start to deal with all of these things under one bureau. We deal with alternative treatment courts, we deal with mental health courts, we deal with vet courts, we deal with drug court. We deal with how people enter the pipeline of the criminal justice system through trauma, through, again, addiction, mental health issues. We have to figure out how to make sure that they're not housed, incarcerated, punished, and just discarded by the criminal justice system as they are now. Because right now, again, it's handled as this kind of ancillary responsibility of a couple of different ADAs who are already overworked and overburdened with the regular case docket. So one of the things that I want to do is do what, and Alvin Bragg has done this in Manhattan, is he's created an entire bureau that's dedicated to restorative justice, and it worries about alternative treatment courts and what these courts are able to do. I mean, this is, again, a prospective vision on what we're going to be able to do within the district attorney's office, just through better administration and leadership.
The next category of question will come under jury. Jury nullification is a rarely known tool that juries have at their disposal when deliberating a case. If the jury feels the law is unjust, they can acquit the defendant. What are your thoughts on our juries having that option? Grand jury to investigate and explore goings on in all levels of our local government. For this round of questions, we'll go honorable source, Mr. Kinlan, Mr. English.
I think our jury, grand jury and our petty jury processes are working fine. These are people, citizens who come together in a grand jury. They're there for several weeks. They're properly instructed, and they have evidence that's presented to them. There's this idea about a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich, which is so untrue, and it basically devalues the intelligence and importance of the people who sit there. There are cases that never get indicted. There are cases that we have no bill because the grand jury didn't feel that the evidence that we presented was enough evidence. And so these are citizens that live amongst you and I who come together, and this is the way that they provide their service. Our petty juries are just as important. These are people that we're asking to take time out of their lives to sit in a room and hear some of the most horrible facts. And they sacrifice their time, they sacrifice moments with their families, they sacrifice their work as well. And so our juries are working fine, despite what some people may say.
Well, as someone who's spoken to more than 70 juries over the course of my civilian career, I can tell you that jury nullification isn't really a thing. If you're a lawyer standing in a courtroom asking a jury to look over here and try and get nullification actually working, then you're not a very good lawyer. So, I know jury nullification is a thing that we talk about, and it came up with Trump, and I heard him talking about it this morning when they were debating Hunter Biden's decision, and maybe they'll get jury nullification because they feel bad for him. But I can tell you, as a practitioner, it's not a real thing. And I apologize to whoever wrote that question because I'm kind of short-circuiting the question. But, look, as a prosecutor, you got to be very upfront about this is the case you're going to present, these are the facts you're going to present, and these are the elements you're going to meet, and I'm going to prove my case beyond a reasonable doubt. And as a defense attorney, you have to say, look, ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution demands more than you think they did it, and then you go through your defense. And whatever that defense is, it's your obligation to present a cogent and normal and reasonable defense to these juries who are looking to you and are looking at your client and are trying to figure out what's going on. I always introduce the concept of jury service when I'm talking to juries because I talk about my grandma Kate. Of course, my grandma Kate doesn't exist. It was actually my great-grandmother Kate. Because you talk about men and women who have no formal legal training, and then they come into a courtroom, and they're introduced to all these concepts. And so what do we trial lawyers do? Well, we talk to you about how you translate all these highfalutin legal ideas then to normal, basic, everyday concepts that everybody would normally understand. And so if you're, telling them to not pay attention to the case and telling them not to pay attention to the legal theories, well, bluntly stated, you're just not a very good lawyer. Again, I apologize to whoever wrote that question, but I'd rather be honest.
Being the only person who has ever presented a case to a grand jury on this panel, and the only person who's ever prosecuted a case in front of a pager, you may not know it because it's a mystery. Okay, this is one of the problems with the criminal justice system. The system becomes mysterious for some reason. When a jury is impaneled, they swear that they will follow the rules and they will follow the laws. Jury notification is a violation of that oath. And to be honest with you, I have never had a jury violate its oath. I have been surprised by juries, don't get me wrong, mostly pleasantly surprised. But every juror that is impaneled promises that they will listen to the judge and they will follow the judge's orders, his rules, and they will follow the law. I agree with David. I don't know why Chief Justice Walker ever said, you can indict a ham sandwich. I've never indicted a ham sandwich in my entire life. Listen, you killed it. I have a mission in my life, in my professional life, and that is to get home, put my head on the pillow, and fall asleep. And I'd like to go to sleep with a clear conscience. I would no more charge a person who is innocent, much less try to prosecute them, much less convict an innocent person. That would be worse than violating the law. That would be worse than violating the Constitution of the state and the federal Constitution. That would be a sin to me. I will not do it. If I find somebody on my staff who does, or if I find somebody who's winking and nodding at the jury, there's going to be a problem. Thank you.
All right, the next question will come under the category of sentencing. Will you recommend alternatives to incarceration, such as community-based alternatives like substance abuse treatment, mental health services, and other programs in addition to probation? We'll start with Mr. Ambrosio, Mr. Soares, Mr. Kendall.
Yes. Are you writing these, Corey? Yes, of course. People don't understand. Again, this is one of the mysteries, right? If you've not been a practitioner, you don't really know what's going on. When a person is convicted, okay, then the court typically, especially if there's going to be extensive jail time, the court will call probation, and they'll ask for a pre-sentence probation report. That is the one time when the icon of justice, the lady that has the scales in her left hand and the sword in her right hand, she's blindfolded. She's blindfolded during all the times when the defendant is a defendant. When the defendant is convicted, they become a criminal. Then the blindfold can come down a little bit because you want to tailor the sentence to the criminal who's been convicted so that criminal can be corrected. It is the Department of Correctional Services. It's not the Department of Revenge. It's not the Department of Retribution. If I've got a person who has a drug habit, of course I want them to get treatment. And that should be a part of the sentence. So yes. Where my hand is.
Perhaps the most important document in all of the criminal justice system, I think we just heard stated, it's the pre-sentence report. It is the most thorough investigative document that the Department of Probation will conduct in order to provide the judge the best information that judge can have prior to that judge issuing the sentence. So it's interviews with family, it's familial health, mental health background, all of that information is contained in this report. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Oddly enough, it is the most frustrating thing as a prosecutor to get that report at the end of the process. After we plea bargained, after we've done all those things, to get it at the end. We have changed our practice in Albany County with very specific cases because you can't do it with everyone. The volume is just far too much. But on very specific cases, we will do what's called a pre-plea sentence report, where before we even convey an offer, we want probation to conduct that thorough of an investigation. Now, we do that with cases where we're considering, especially youth. Now, we have a diversion program, despite what some people may say. Diversion program is governed by one person in the office. That's Renee Merges. She's the person who's involved in lead. She's the person in drug court. She's the person in mental health court. She's the person in our gun diversion. She's the person who does CAD. She's the one-stop shop for everything that we do by way of diversion in Albany County. But I will tell you this, there are many more opportunities for diversion. Why did we do the pre-plea sentencing report? Because if I've got a young man with 4 kids who's not a violent person but was apprehended with a gun, and the only reason he's got a gun and he has no history, but the only reason he has a gun is because everybody else on these streets have guns, that's the guy I want to take a risk with, because sentencing him to incarceration means that I'm also sentencing his children to incarceration. Pre-plea sentencing is something that we ought to make normal in our process.
It's been a couple of years, but I represented a young man in Albany County who was arrested with a gun. Good kid, no problems, carried a gun because somebody was threatening him and his mom. Pulled over by the New York State Police, they found a gun in his car. David Sorr's office wanted to put him in state prison for 4 years. No other issues. Just happened a couple of years ago. And we begged and we pleaded, and they wouldn't change their mind, and we showed them all the mitigating proof that we could think of, and we told them it wasn't the greatest search, and they didn't care. Until finally Judge Ackerman came to me and she said, you know what, Lee, I have an idea. It's called UCAN. UCAN pairs a young man with no other criminal record with a mentor. And we give him a second chance. Now, Lee, we've never had this program before. Your client's going to be our first one through. And I don't think she had pain for it. I think she did. Her and I, and we kind of set it up on the fly, and the kid was skeptical, and he took a plea. And this young man today, after he made it through the program, because he pled right to the judge after he made it through the program, Judge Ackerman dismissed his charges, sealed his record. I'm happy to say the young man's now an active duty Marine, of all things, stationed down at Camp Lejeune. He spoke recently to the Court of Appeals about the success of UCAN in his journey. So you got to understand my amazement a couple of months ago when I had another young man in almost exactly the same situation, and I brought him in front of Judge Ackerman and I said, hey, UCAN. And I was told that the Albany County District Attorney's Office no longer supported UCAN, and they didn't approve of anybody pleading into it. I mean, I was shocked because it's a program that worked. So let's differentiate between what is said and what is done, because they're two very different things.
All right, we have received some questions from the audience. I'll read. We'll start with the beginning. We'll start with Mr. Kinlan. What is your plan to prosecute violent crimes tied directly to the growing gang activity?
So every night I go door to door, right? Worn out a pair of shoes. I'm on my second set at this point. Last week I ran into a very nice woman who had just retired from the New York State, from DCJS, right? She was talking about all the intelligence that they have and that they can use to help figure out how to go out and break up the gangs and the gun pipelines and all these things. And she said, look, you know, it's not used to effectiveness in Albany County. It's just not. You know, she said, we have all these resources and all this information. And Lee, one of the things that you should do, and I said, we should be more proactive, like the Northern District, like the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Attorney General. She said, yeah. She said, there are all these ideas out there that are just not being taken advantage of in Albany County. Because what we are right now is reactive. What we are right now is relying on overworked and overburdened sheriff deputies, all the police officers, kind of being reactive and getting guns onesies and twosies off the streets, right? Like, imagine if we could go forward and actually stop this pipeline of guns coming into Albany County. Like, imagine what we'd be able to do if we sat down with reformed gang leaders and cops and had constructive conversations about, hey, where's the trouble in your neighborhood? Because they've been through it, they're at the back end, and they want to help. Like, I know these guys, and I know they want to sit down and help their communities. Like, let's imagine we start having those hard conversations with people. Because I'll be at the head of that table, and I'll invite everybody to sit around and talk, and we're going to come up with those solutions to finally drive down what is the highest violent crime rate in the state of New York. And it's been that way for more than a decade. Like, let's be honest about our violent crime problem here in Albany. That violent crime rate drops all over the state. Somehow in Albany County, it stays static.
Violent criminals have to go to prison. That's number one. Period. You find loaded guns on people, as far as I'm concerned, they gotta pay the price. I'm sorry if they feel as if they've gotta do it for their well-being or their safety. That's not all right. That's not how you get a pistol permit in Albany County when I'm here, okay? Not because you want it. Done. Now, every time the district attorney's office doesn't hold the criminal responsible at every level, whether it's shoplifting or gang violence, or whatever it is, that Albany County does not recognize that person as a criminal and make that criminal responsible, you're watering and fertilizing a root ball. You know what a root ball is, right? You have to water feed it, and then it grows, and then the flowers pop up. The violent crime that we're seeing in Albany County today are the flowers of that root ball. You've got to go after every criminal act that occurs in this county. Deal with it and hold people responsible. You have to make people respect the law at every level. You have to do that. Gang violence comes from the fact that these kids don't feel safe going to a police officer. So what do? They band together and they create gangs. What a great idea. What are we turning this into, the wild forest? No, we have to have an active law enforcement presence. We have to keep making criminals responsible at every level. We catch them in a minor crime, we make them pay. Now, we do it proportionally. I'm not looking for a pound of flesh. But that's it. We are harvesting, the violence we are harvesting is the disrespect of the law that we have been sowing in this county.
What was the question again? Because
I got you.
I'm in the flowers.
What is your plan to prosecute What is your plan to prosecute violent crimes tied directly to the growing gang activity?
The first thing that the people at this table need to understand is that the gang activity that we have in the city of Albany dates back generations. We have an uptown, downtown civil war in the city of Albany that has been going on before I walked the first day that I walked the sidewalk here in Albany County. And the fact that the tools that we used to use and we had to be able to do interdiction, for example, when there was a shooting uptown, the police rushed downtown because we knew the retaliation was here, we would catch that person. What they haven't talked about is that you take that ongoing civil war and now you place these ridiculous reforms over the top of that, and what you have, yes, are increases in Albany that you don't find in other places. And the reason why is because you do not have a civil war in other places that have been going on in Albany for generations. That's the reality. I don't know what street someone was walking on when they came across someone from the crack, the Crime Analysis Center. The Crime Analysis Center, 24 hours a day, provide us with reports. I get them on my phone. They list every single contact that individual has had. As a matter of fact, the additional funding that the crack received is because of the work that I did with the DEA and the ATF in getting more money to pursue guns. But you know what you need to do in order to pursue guns and do it more effectively? You need a lot of people to conduct these high-level investigations. Because you know what we're doing right now? What every member of the Albany Police Department, what Craig Apple and the Sheriff's Department are doing right now, we are running from one fire to the next, because those are the things that are happening right now. So the fantasy forest and all these things that we're gonna do to run down guns from Mississippi and Vermont, that's great. You know, someday we'll have the time to do that. But right now, it's saving people's lives right now.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. How would you ensure fair convictions, particularly when witnesses are afraid to speak? We'll start with Mr. Ambrosio, an honorable source, and Mr. Kidman.
Your child goes to work and witnesses a crime. Your child comes home and tells you. What do you tell your child? The reforms that we have now, David has touched on a couple of things. Do you know and discover that we have to hand over the personal information of all witnesses, including telephone numbers and addresses? What do you tell your daughter when she says she wants to do the right thing and report a crime? What I'm going to do in the DA's office, I'm going to use technology. Have you ever been spoofed? I get calls all the time from people that are trying to sell me things. They come up with a 518 in Delmar's 439 number, and they're calling from Oklahoma. When I give out, I will not give out the personal information of a victim or a witness unless I cover that with a code. The defendant will get a telephone number, and they will be able to contact the victim. They will have the due process that they want, but they will never get the home telephone number of my victims. That's what I'm going to do. And I'll put the Victims Fair Treatment Standards Act too. It's in the executive law. There's just a whole menu of things you have to do to protect people. But you think about that. You think about that 3 o'clock in the morning conversation with your daughter. That's frightening. And I'm telling you, the violence we are getting now. Look, are you telling me that the ride-along program with the state police out in Rochester is known as a shooting gallery? You think Albany's the only place that does this? I disagree with both of these fellas. I know for a fact the state police have to be right along with the Albany cops, with the Schenectady cops, Rochester, Utica. I don't think we're in Buffalo. This is happening everywhere. It's a disrespect of our criminal justice system, and it has to stop. Are you done? We're done?
I think we go clockwise.
It'll go Mr. Soares. Can you do the question again?
Sure. Repeat the question, please.
How would you ensure fair convictions, particularly when witnesses are afraid to speak?
We used to have an environment in the criminal justice system that we could provide assurances that their names would not be turned over until a few weeks before trial, so that individuals wouldn't have to fear or have intimidation. We would, in addition to that, engage in witness protection. So if we had to remove someone from the community, we would be able to put that individual up in a hotel outside of Albany County until the day of trial. That has all been taken, those options have all been taken from us because, again, the daydream believers who believe that every criminal, if you just hand them an appearance ticket, they're going to show up because they keep their appointments. Those are the same people that profess and brag about the protective order. Well, I don't know if you picked up your newspapers the last several days, but we have an incident where a witness who was lodged in federal prison in Plattsburgh, we have an incident where that individual's life was threatened because of a trial that was supposed to start this week. And it had to do with allegations that a defense attorney, in violation of a protective order, provided the witness list to the people that are going on trial. These are the things that we scramble with and the challenge that we have every single day in the DA's office. And not just my office, offices all across the state. So we have problems in when we are able to apprehend people, we have problems keeping them in. When we are able to try these individuals, we have problems in the sense that they're now working the mechanics of their relationships to find out who witnesses are to keep them from testifying. This is the worst Quentin Tarantino movie, and we call it life. And the people who live in safe communities like my community, who have no worries about bullets flying through the window, those people don't have, they can have the opinions, they can share in the virtue because they don't have to share in the burden. It's people here that have to live with the burden.
Ooh, well, you know, when I heard the question asked, I thought, golly, David's not going to talk about an ongoing case, is he? Because that's what got censored 12 years ago. And yet, here he goes, steps in it, talks about an ongoing case that's now being investigated by the state police in which members of his office are potential witnesses. And that man just can't help but to make a political talking point out of something that's ongoing. So
Did you read the paper, Lee?
yes.
If you guys gonna.
So anyway, look, it's funny that we follow this story of his about all the funding he fought with him complaining about discovery reform, because I do read the paper, and I also know that the paper's told us all that David took a lot of the funding that's meant to help his office before and put it in his own pocket. So I'm not entirely sure that David's cynicism about all the reforms that are going on and all that's needed to take place are actually,
Hang on. If the audience can keep it down, please, once you're done speaking.
So look, let me tell you something. I deal with these protective orders, I deal with discovery turnover, and I deal with the ethical responsibilities of being an attorney. And I can tell you as an officer of the court, we do everything in the world we can because we understand how important discovery reform is. We understand how it makes cases more fair, how it actually makes deals more fair, how it makes resolutions better, how it ultimately makes trials better, how it allows a defendant to actually conduct an investigation. I mean, there are a lot of things that we need to look out for, and whatever case may be as the outlier, let's think about 99% of the cases in which everybody involved in the case, the judge, the cops, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and even the accused are actually doing the right thing and following the rules. Now, do we need to tighten around the margins? Absolutely. And would we do everything we can to increase the use of protective orders? Absolutely.
Sorry. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Killen. How does bail reform allow for equitable bail release, particularly for people who may be more well off than others?
And that really is the crux of it, isn't it? It's, bail reform, the goal was to stop punishing people for being poor, right? Because you could commit a violent felony and they could set bail at $25,000. And if you had a mom or a dad or a grandmother who could pay a bail bondsman, and you're accused of a violent crime, you could be out within an hour. But if you're accused of the same crime and you just don't have the money, well, then you're not going anywhere as the case kind of proceeds forward. So it was an economic issue, much less than it was a dangerousness issue. And let's be honest here, like bail as it existed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there was never a dangerousness standard that existed before reform. Now, do we in the future move towards a dangerousness standard? Do we in the future move towards what they do down in federal court, or what they do down in New Jersey, where it's kind of a point-based system? Yeah, like we can probably get there after we show, the continued tinkering needs with bail reform. But one of the things that I will not apologize for is my belief that just because you're poor doesn't mean you don't deserve the same benefits as those people who happen to have money in the criminal justice system. Like, regardless of your socioeconomic status, you're entitled to a defense. You're entitled to your rights under the Constitution. You're entitled to a public defender who fights as hard as a private attorney would. So, if we want to talk about balancing some equities here, there's always the socioeconomic status that has to be taken into account. Now, again, if we're concerned about public safety, there are reforms that are going to get us a lot closer to making a more safe community, but if we're just talking about money here, then I think bail reform got us just a little closer to more equitable treatment in the criminal justice system.
Bail reform is ridiculous. Bail reform is a revolving door. Bail reform is not the problem. Bail is not in and of itself a disincentive to poor people. Excessive bail is a disincentive. And it's something that you have to deal with as a human being. And you have to look at how people are treated. There's 440 motions. If you get excessive bail, if you get more bail than what you think you have a right or you need, you can take that and appeal that. I'm not saying it's personal or even perfect. It's not even good. But our whole system has to be based on reasonable people having the quiet conversations in the quiet rooms like this, negotiating, talking, trying to figure out better ways. You cannot get rid of bail. Bail is absolutely necessary. I can do a jury rigging, not jury rigging, jury rigging like a sailor, and I can make it work by doing Parker warnings, like I told you before. I can make it without any money changing hands, make the defendant come back to court. That's what a Parker warning is, because the person knows if they don't show up, they're going to be receiving possibly an enhanced sentence. We'll talk about this till the cows come home. You have to have bail. Where there are abuses, we have to call OCA, Office of Court of Administration. It's human beings working to make a system work. That's what you need. Don't ignore it. The bail reform that we have now is a complete and utter failure.
I think most people in the state of New York recognize my position on bail reform. And I will curb my tongue and not try to respond to things that have been said other than this. If bail reform is working so incredibly, I would just ask the people who live in communities that support bail reform but don't have to share the burden of bail reform, to see if we can do one of those television shows, you know, where you switch homes for a couple of weeks. Because I think when a 10-year-old has an iPad and is trying to go to sleep and he's sneaking that iPad from mom who's in the next room, but all of a sudden a bullet goes through the window and goes through his shoulder, I don't think you'd be in support of bail reform when the individual shooting the gun happens to be one of the individuals that is out on another crime. I don't think you support bail reform. Bail reform, again, it's not just the issue of people engaging in criminal behavior and then going right back on the street. It's the way your police can interact with you. No longer can a person who's urinating outside of a restaurant that you happen to be enjoying, no longer can that officer put cuffs on that person and remove them away. They bring them with them to the station, they process them, and that person goes right back before you had dessert.
All right. This next line of question will start with Honorable Source. Honorable Source, you have identified a number of blocks as the most criminal. Do you agree, and how should those neighborhood residents be treated by law enforcement?
Let me just say this. I want to make sure that I say it slowly enough so that everyone can perhaps hear this. Whenever there is crisis in this community, like the one that happened right outside of these doors, and I'm sure we're not going to ever see pictures of those things, like a burning truck and Molotov cocktails being thrown at police officers and glass being shattered here as well in this building. We're never going to see those things. But what you do see are people who may look like me, who may work for, a specific organization or activists that don't live in these neighborhoods. Those are the people that are oftentimes quoted in the paper. They have that active Twitter account, and they create the appearance that police are not welcome in black neighborhoods. And then you go to those places where actually these events are taking place, and the first thing you hear out of the residents, Why don't we have more police here? I think ongoing debates about the quality of policing is always fair game. We should have those conversations. But don't say defund the police. Don't say, hey, this community is over-policed. Really? The communities that are alleged to be over-policed happen to be the communities that we pick up the most volumes of guns from. They also happen to be the neighborhoods where we see most of the violent acts. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, we got to think beyond the criminal justice system. Why are we investing in those neighborhoods so that the young people who are raised there aren't being raised in a culture of absolute insanity and chaos where they think that the only way to handle a conflict is to take a gun and shoot someone? We have much deeper issues in this city and in our communities than you can just thrust upon the criminal justice system. I don't believe that we are capable of fixing all of these problems. What we are capable of doing is removing the most violent of our problems in order to let that community breathe and have that chance at restoration.
Mr. Ambrosio?
Could you please repeat the question?
Honorable source has identified a number of blocks as the most criminal. Do you agree? And how should those neighborhood residents be treated by law enforcement?
Okay. I am fairly old school. The duty of a prosecutor is to prosecute. I don't care where it is, I don't care who it is. I care about what the person has done, not who the person is. If I get complaints in a particular area, if the police choose to saturate that area, I'm there with bells on. I'm on the other side of the telephone, and so will my staff be. We will prosecute every single charge. I will talk with them. This is why I say early case evaluation. I want to know what's going on in my community. And if we get a block of people, a block of areas where there's a lot of crime, we're going to concentrate on that. And I'm not going to think about diversion. I'm not going to think about social work. And I'm not going to think about all this other nice stuff. And I'm going to keep my pinky up when I'm drafting charges. I'm going to be old school, and I'm going to get people arrested. I'm going to prosecute them. That's my job. And by the way, when I prosecute somebody, then they get into the system, and the people who can help them have some leverage. I worked with a local criminal court once that had a 12-month ACOD, adjournment contemplation of dismissal. And what this guy did, and I think local criminal judges are the best, I do. What he did was, this kid had a drug problem. Rather than charge him, convict him, and all that stuff, he made that kid come to that court every first Monday for 12 months. And he watched that kid, and mentored that kid, and made that kid better. As far as, centralized or pinpoint prosecuting, I'm all for it. Whatever the police are going to do, I'm not necessarily going to agree with everything the police do, but if the police are going to try and clean a place up, I'm there. And you can bet your life I'm going to spend some time and people are going to go and be responsible for their actions. Thank you.
One of the initiatives that I think has been great and has worked, and unfortunately has fallen off in recent times, is community policing. You find communities who know that they need cops in their neighborhoods. You find cops who know that they need to be in these neighborhoods. Look, over the years I've developed relationships with police officers who tell me that some of the most rewarding days of their lives is the ability to walk through neighborhoods and make friends with people and, understand that they're a resource. So I agree. I mean, these are not, I don't know exactly who these affect, pinky raising Twitter users are, but I agree. I think that a police presence in affected neighborhoods is the most important thing out there. But you can't be as cops as they are now, sprinting from one crime scene to the next in their cars. I mean, you need men and women on the street. You need to increase the actual number of Albany police. I think they're down like 70 or 80 cops at this point. And that goes back to just supporting law enforcement and the job that they do, because we all know cops, right? They're not just there to arrest people. They're there to play basketball with kids. They're there to intervene in mental health crises. They're there to break up a domestic violence incident. Yeah, they're there to investigate crimes as well, but like, how many of us, when we were little, wanted to grow up and be a cop because they're respected members of our community? And now these men and women are out there and they're just overworked and overburdened. And so what do we do at the back end as the district attorney's office? I mean, obviously, we understand that the Albany Police Department has one of the highest case closure rates, but then when those cases go to the district attorney's office, the prosecution rates, the dismissal rates are way up, speedy trial, 188.5 motions are up. But what do we need to do is support the police at every phase of their job. That way we increase the police numbers. It's not going to happen overnight, but we allow them to refill their ranks because they know that they're supported at all phases.
All right, as we move to the final question, start with Mr. Kinlan. What is the greatest obstacle facing the DA's office, and what steps would you take in transforming its operations and policies?
The Albany County District Attorney's Office is a place where legendary prosecutors walk the halls over the years. And look, I might be the only person in this room who has told bedtime stories about guys like Dan Dwyer and Sullivan Greenberg, who I grew up the street from, shoveling his driveway. So, and I've had the opportunity to, over the years, to work with men and women who have been Albany County District Attorneys, right? The ADAs in the courtroom. And maybe it's the older I get, but all these experienced prosecutors, all these men and women that I've developed professional, good relationships with, have all left. They're all gone. And it's not because of money, because, if you become a prosecutor, you do it for more than the money. You do it because you know you're making a difference. And yeah, they're overworked, but you become a prosecutor because you know you're making a difference. And so it's been so upsetting to see this generation of prosecutors walk out the door and just go do something else. So one of the things that needs to be done is, obviously, you got to rebuild the ranks. You got to understand that higher training standards and more men and women. We flood the zone. We just hire more people to do the job. We train that next generation of great men and women who are there because they understand that they're making that difference. We refill the ranks that have been depleted over the last couple of 18, 24 months. This is going to be one of the biggest focuses of the first year of my administration, is maybe bringing some people back and saying, look, it's a new day, there's new leadership, I actually care about your concerns, we're going to prosecute bad guys, we're going to keep people safe, we're going to fulfill that thing that you wanted when you became a prosecutor. And then we're going to train the men and women to do trials better, to understand how people come into the criminal justice system and how we can help them get a second chance if need be.
All right, Mr. Ambrosio, the question is, what is the greatest obstacle facing the DA's office, and what steps would you take in transforming its operations and policies?
The greatest obstacle to the DA's office are these new reforms. And these unreasonable, ridiculous, arbitrary rules that have been foisted on the DA's office by all of these reforms. I broke in Dover Plains, I mentioned that before. The first time I ever saw early case evaluation was a multiple serial killer. His name was Juggin Joe Fisher. Google him, he's real, a real story. It was in 1979, I was a brand new trooper. I went, he went to a New York City police precinct and gave himself up, said he murdered his wife. We got him up to Dover Plains, we opened up his duffel bag, and in his duffel bag were 40 or so Polaroid pictures of women he had killed. We could prove 40 of them. He claimed 100. Well, in an instant, my station, Dover Plains Station, turned into a special detail. My station turned into an early case evaluation. The DAs came to my station, and we worked that case, and we convicted him of 40 murders. This is before we called serial murder. Now, it's that type of emergency response that we need in the DA's office, and that's why I keep pounding on this early case evaluation and central booking, where I can talk to the arresting officers in real time, help them with drafting their accusatory instruments, that are facts of an evidentiary nature capable of supporting each and every element of the offense, proving that there's a crime and that the defendant is responsible for it. Now that little piece I just told you, you think I stayed up all last night trying to memorize that? Or do you think I've said that about 15,000 times over 47 years? We've got to treat the criminal justice system from the DA's office as we are in an emergency. Full court press. I want my people talking to the arresting officers in real time. And that's how you make it work. And that's how you break up these gangs and everything else. You work on it. And I intend to work on it.
Honorable source, if elected again, what have you found in your current operations you are interested in or working on to improve the office operations and policies?
One of the things that we started most recently because of the failures of those reforms is to go back to the drawing board and work with retailers and restaurant owners. And we've just focused aggressively on nuisance crimes. We've been working with one specific judge in Albany City Court, and it doesn't mean that we're going around and just arresting people with mental health issues. It means that when they do something to violate the law, our beat cops are bringing them in, and we're also putting them on track to get treatment. And if not to get treatment, we're going to monitor closer their activities once they leave court. That's one of the things I'm proud of, because it's the business owners that have stepped up to do a lot of the work to help police and prosecutors. Those are the kind of relationships that I've had over time. There are things that are said and have been said here that I just can't let go, because I run for office like I run my office. If I lie to get the job, I'm going to lie to keep the job. I have never lied when I'm running for my position. The idea that someone could sit here and talk about closure rates and dismissals in the office, obviously no one's reading the Times Union when they do pick up our cases, because what you get week after week after week are convictions on some of the most dangerous people. Shootings that go unreported, that we get convictions on. We are changing this community one by one, but here's the thing. We can't do it if most of the people that are participating in this insanity keep being released. And all of the discussions about shouldering up and going in front of the judge and arguing to the judge, if a judge can't consider dangerousness, you can't argue dangerousness. And those are the things that are being said at this table that I'm wondering whether or not you actually understand what the role of a prosecutor is. I understand
Honorable source.
you're defending people, but the role of a prosecutor and how that's changed.
You know, we're clapping for the end of it.
In closing, I would like to convey some important voter information. To vote in a primary in New York State, you must be a registered voter, enrolled in a political party. Your party must be holding a primary. You will only be voting for those candidates running in your party. This year, the primary for those parties holding primary elections is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. Early voting begins on June 15th to the 23rd. Please check with the Albany County Board of Elections for dates, times, and locations of early voting polling sites. They may be different from your usual voting location. The Board of Elections telephone number is 518-487-5060. Now, I will pass it over to Ms. Beverly Ivey.
Let's give a round of applause for our candidate. The patience in sitting and being here. We will have closing remarks. We had 7 sponsors, and we would like to give recognition. And so when you're called up, please, whoever's the speaker, the last speaker will be Deborah Brown, who is the president of the Albany NACP, who will bring information regarding the NACP. So our first sponsor, AKA, coming up to speak or give words. Here she comes, our president of the chapter, and then following AKA will be the Delters, and then the League of New Voters in that order, please.
I'll keep my remarks brief. My name is Andrea West. I'm the president of the Delta Mu Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Will all of our members in the audience please stand? district for over 77 years. Alpha Kappa Alpha has been serving the world for the past 116 years. One of our international programs is being an advocate for social justice. Alpha Kappa Alpha has always been at the forefront of social justice to promote fairness and equity. We stand in the gap to empower our communities and act in the best interest of all people through social advocacy and justice. We equip communities with the tools, knowledge, and support to activate their voices and mobilize self-help to empower communities to help themselves, including by providing information about African American and other women of color currently serving in political leadership positions, as well as how to create a pathway for women interested in politics. Through this program, we also sponsor public policy forums like this one that discuss social justice, politics, and how to engage in them. We would love to thank the NAACP Albany chapter, the Albany Housing Authority, and under the leadership of the Executive Director, Ms. Chiquita Diarvo. And all other sponsors for organizing this important forum for us tonight. We thank each and every one of the panelists. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Salika Grant, and I am the chapter president of the Albany, New York Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I will ask that all of my sorors please stand. For the sake of brevity, I would just like to state that Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated was founded by 22 collegiate women on January 13, 1913, on the campus of Howard University. Our chapter has been serving the Capital District since 1967. Delta means change. We stand on the premise of sisterhood, social action, service, and citizen scholarship. Thank you. It's late. I know y'all are tired. We're happy to come work a long day. I know my information, but I just want to thank the panelists for coming today. Certainly, it's always very interesting and brave of you to not only come and stand on your platform, your ideologies, but to come before the community and be questioned and pretty much interrogated on your thoughts. And so it takes a brave person. So we thank you for your time. We are grateful that you are running. We're grateful that you are passionate about the platforms that you stand on. So we just encourage the community to engage with the candidates, research their information, research their platform. An educated voter is an empowered voter. Thank you.
I'm the first vice president of the League of Women Voters of Albany County. And we are very excited to be here co-sponsoring this event tonight, which will provide the voters of Albany County with important information about the candidates running for the Albany County District Attorney. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that for over 100 years has promoted political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League does not support nor oppose any candidate or any political party. We register voters, we provide them with information about how and when to vote, and we invite you to join us in our work. Through the League's Vote 411 tool, we provide voters with information about the candidates. Mr. Kinlan has accepted the League's invitation and has input his answers into, for the Democratic primary into Vote 411. I invite District Attorney Soares to do so, and Mr. Ambrosio to do so in the fall for the general election. Go to vote411.org and check this tool out. Thank you all for coming tonight and being informed voters.
Sponsors, but a public service announcement I was asked to make. Saturday, June 15th is the African American Day Heritage Parade. It will start at 10 o'clock in Washington Park to line up. I don't know if Mark Park Sample is still here, but if there he is, raise his hand, he will speak, and you can sit after the program to get more information. But that is important. Juneteenth, we know it's a federal holiday, it falls on the 19th, but we are celebrating it this weekend. There's more. All right, now, moving on, the Capital District chapter of the National Panhellenic and the Council of Albany Neighborhood Associations, please come up here, representative, and give some closing remarks. Thank you.
I'm with Cana, the Council of Albany Neighborhood Associations. We've been around about 70 years. We started in about 1970, excuse me. We started when someone in a neighborhood decided he didn't want a highway going through it from the South Mall, and he found other people in the neighborhood who agreed with him, and they all became a lot stronger, and that highway did not get built. So what I'm saying is that all of you are familiar with how associations make you strong. I think that a neighborhood association gives you a variety of ways of doing that, excuse me, pulls in a lot of people, and basically can cover almost any kind of issue. We have about 30 neighborhoods in Albany. There are about 20 active neighborhood associations. The one representing here is the South End Neighborhood Association. They are one of the active ones. Just want to let you know. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I bring you greetings on behalf of my president, who cannot be here tonight, Brother Timothy Owens. For the sake of time, you can Google us, Capital District National Panhellenic Council. You can follow us on Instagram. If you don't remember anything else, vote, vote, vote. Once again,
Next last sponsor, Top Ladies of Distinction, Dr. Kimberly Davis is the first vice president. I'd like to bring her forward. Thank you.
I know we are all ready to go home, so I will not be before you long. I wanted to share some exciting news. I am a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. However, tonight I am standing as the first vice president of Top Ladies of Distinction. This is a new organization that will be coming to the capital region. Our name is the Tri-City Gems. On August the 10th, we want to invite you guys out to celebrate our new charter. It will be at the Desmond Hotel. Ticket sales and other information is to come. Top Ladies of Distinction was chartered in Texas in 1964. We stand on the belief of education and humanities principles. There were 8 charter members. Today, we have over 7,500 members, which are powerful women that are dedicated and they believe in women empowerment, empowering the youth, servicing our senior citizens, as well as community beautification. So please come out and support us on August the 10th and look forward to additional information. Thank you, and remember, in order to have a voice, you have to vote.
The last person we bring forward is Deborah Brown. Deborah Brown is the president of the National Association of Colored People, the Albany branch here. And before that, I do want to thank Corey James again. He's going to be the moderator. It's very good.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to first thank you all for being part of this evening's program. I want to thank the candidates for participating. It's important for the community to hear the thoughts, the thinking, the planning, the perspective of those who are seeking their vote to be in positions to determine the quality of life for them in the community. So I thank you for answering the call. I'd like to thank our moderator, Mr. James. I would like to thank all the co-sponsors, the AKA Delta Sigma Theta, League of Women Voters, the Top Ladies of Distinction, CANA, the National Panhellenic Council, and also like to give a special thanks to the Albany Housing Authority for allowing us to hold this program. the Albany NAACP Civic Engagement Committee for their work. Under the leadership of our capable Civic Engagement Chair, Ms. Beverly Ivy. The Albany NAACP has been in existence here in Albany since 1935. The national organization since 1909. We, the NAACP, believes that information is power, and we strive to empower the community by providing information that allow them to advocate for themselves as well as for others, and to challenge injustices wherever and whenever it occurs. We are grateful for your participation and hope that you heard something tonight that will inform you in your decision as to who you think will best represent you in this county with all its diversity as district attorney. Please, as others have said, vote. Help someone register to vote. Take someone to the poll. It is important, it is imperative, and it's not just on the national level. Politics is local. The person you elect when it comes time for mayor is going to make decisions about your everyday life. If you own a dog, they're going to decide who the dog catcher is going to be. The policies and decisions they make will impact you. They're going to impact what happens in terms of taxes, clean up the streets, whatever it may be. It is important. We cannot leave it to others, because if you don't vote, in fact, you have made a vote, because you said the other person's decision is what's going to happen with your life. You have to the NAACP, we have been putting together door knockers through contribution we've received from Spectrum. We will continue to do this during the primary, and we plan to do it during the election period. And we plan to do this in communities where we've gotten data that there are low voting rate in terms of individuals actually going to. And we'll look for others to assist us in this effort. We have to inform our community. We have to have everyone go out to vote. We also are a membership organization, and so over Ms. Tanya, would you raise your hand? That is our membership chair. And also I'd like to share, Ms. Ivy has shared about the Juneteenth and the celebration, which will be here on Saturday in front of the Cultural Center. The whole block. The whole block. And also, it would also be at the Underground Railroad on Livingston Street as well. Okay, there will be transportation between the trolley, between the sites. So please come out and enjoy, get information, meet people. It's a community activity. Thank you. Thank you all.
I do.